Alright, in our last video I had to end it because I was running out of parts. Still needed carburetor, headers, still waiting on the distributor, but I got a bunch of stuff that came in. Oh, and I finished running all my brake lines, front, rear, master cylinder, all that's hooked up. So got a few parts in here, so I think I can get a little bit more done. And a lot of stuff came in. So we got a carburetor. Now the intake manifold on there is the spread bore. So this Quadrajet was a pretty good deal. It's remanufactured, and it comes with piece of hose, filter, gasket, even has different jets you can change out. So also got this universal throttle cable, and hopefully I can make that work. And this adapter that holds the kickdown stud, and I dug through all my stuff and found one of these off an old carburetor. Those are kind of hard to find. Water outlet for the heater hose, and got more odds and ends for the brakes and little things that were missing, and brake shoes, or hopefully they'll fit. And I got a cable started, I soldered an end on, and a little plug for the alternator, and some terminal ends, and mega fuse holders, so I can get the cable from the alternator over to where the battery goes wired in. Now these headers, I wasn't expecting them to fit at all, but they've got the really thick 3/8 flange, and these were 130 bucks. And the flange itself, if you're going to make up your own headers, oh, the kits and stuff were like $600, $800, $1,000. So I says, I'll just order these. I get the flange, and I've got these old small block heavy Chevy headers that I got purposely to cut them up for the tubes, because those were even cheaper than these. And unbelievably, the passenger side is going to fit. I tried it on there, and it's going to fit down in there. It has maybe a little bit of clearance issue here where it hits the shock tower, but I think I can just pound that in a little bit and get some clearance. But I'm gonna, on the driver's side, I'm gonna have to cut it up, extend this over, and move the flange somewhere in this area. So that's one of the things that I'll probably be doing here first, because it ain't gonna do me any good to get it running if I'm shooting flames straight out the headers or the heads without any sort of exhaust on it. So we're gonna get going on this, since we got some more parts, and see what we can get done this time. Okay, it's the next day, and I got a serious mess going on here. I hacked away the other header so that I could get all the tubes, and I really didn't think this was going to work, but now that I did a little tacking and a little welding, I think it might just work. It's going to be Frankenstein, but this is a budget build, and I'm not going to get custom headers that are $1,000. So we're gonna make this work. So I've got this so it'll just barely clear the gearbox, and then right about here is where the knuckle assembly goes into the gearbox, but it's a big old round thing. I'm going to order a smaller U-joint. I think there's going to be enough clearance, but if I get a smaller U-joint, it will work a lot better. We'll have plenty of clearance. So, got this one test fitted, tried it on there. So I've got to weld up in here where I can't get to before I start cutting up tubes to get this routed back down into there. So I'm going to do a little welding on this and see if we can make this work. Okay, as you can see, it is really ugly, but it's functional. It clears the steering gearbox. It even clears this big bulky flex joint. Of course, I got one on order that's like a smaller U-joint that I'm going to weld onto the shaft, and we'll get even more clearance. But it's setting in there. And the only thing I'm worried about is if it's going to run into the starter. I don't think so. Looks like there's plenty of room. I'll just have to make the pipe curve and go that way. So, now that we got this done, we can move on to a few other things. Okay, now that we got our header adapted, I want to see if I can go ahead and get this carburetor mounted. Got the little adapter piece and the little Mopar kickdown attachment, all the screws and bolts, and we got this cable, and I'm going to see if we can cut it to length and hook it up to the throttle. So I'm going to get going on this. Okay, now we're going to see if everything lines up. Okay, looks like it's gonna work. Okay, I got my cable housing run through and run the cable up through it. It's like extra long, so you can cut it to fit. And up in here, there's a little ball on the end of the cable, and there's like a hole and then a slot. So I slotted it up in there and popped a rivet in there so the cable can't come out. So I think that's going to work when we get a throttle return spring on it. So we're going to see if we can cut this cable down to size and hook up a spring. I'm gonna have to make a bracket to run a spring. So let's see if we can get this to work. Okay, got my throttle return spring hooked up. Seems to be working really good. And now I'm going to go ahead and run the fuel line from the pump down here up to the carburetor. Okay, now that I got the carburetor all hooked up, fuel lines and throttle linkage and all that, I'm going to go ahead and start wiring in my alternator. And I drilled some holes and put grommets so I can run the wire across the radiator core support and through this one. And I'm going to mount a mega fuse here and then from there to the battery. So I've got to get this run through there and measure how long it needs to be. Okay, I got my cable routed up through here and I got my mini mega fuse mounted, and I'm gonna go ahead and mark it about right there, and then I'll know it's gonna be long enough to reach. So we're gonna go ahead and get the terminal in soldered on this. Okay, let's see if these big old scissors are gonna cut this. Wow, there it goes. Alrighty. Now, I'll bear back some of the insulation. That's some pretty tough insulation. Okay. Let's get a little heat shrink on here. Okay, see if we can get this heated up. Okay, I think that's gonna work. Okay, it's a couple days later and I've got my alternator wire run and the little jumper wire run up to it, so it's gonna make electricity. Needs a couple more zip ties up in here to hold it up in there, but I got my little mini mega fuse mounted. But meanwhile, I finally got the right torque converter after ordering about 4 of them. And I got some fittings for the cooler lines on the transmission. Now this has been holding me up from putting my header in because I need the transmission in and the starter in to see if everything's gonna clear. So, right now, I want to get this transmission up in there and see what's going to be in the way and what's not. So we're going to go ahead and start doing that. Okay, got this transmission up in here, fairly well lined up, and got a couple bolts in it. And I'm going to see if I can fit my ratchet up in here. Got this strap right in the way, but maybe. Okay, got that one. And let's see if we can bring the light over here. We might be able to sneak this one in here. If I can get this handle down out of the way. Okay. Now, we want to see if our torque converter is still spinning freely. Yep, still is. Okay. So we haven't destroyed the transmission so far. I'm going to get a few more of these bolts tightened up, and we'll see if we can get the cross member in here. Okay, got my cross member all cleaned up. It was caked. So cleaned it up and painted it, and let's see if this is going to line up. Been in the car before, so hopefully everything will still line up. Okay, that one's a little stubborn. Okay. Okay, now we can get the transmission jack off of it. We can raise the car up so we don't have to be down here on the ground. Okay, Mopar torque converters are always fun because they have the offset pattern, and they got these tiny little 5/16 fine threaded bolts. And if you go try to use a regular wrench, they have a chamfer on them, and you're only gripping about half the bolt. So what I always do is find a wrench and grind it flat so that you're actually gripping the whole bolt. So I'm gonna go over here and got one bolt in there and rolled it around to where everything's lining up with that offset. Got some Loctite on them, and I'm gonna see if we can get this one started. Might have to shift it around a little bit. No, too far. Okay. Come on in there. I know it fits. I tried them all. Threads are good. I'm just being retarded here. Come on. Ah, there we go. Finally got that one lined up. And if you turn your crankshaft just right, you can get two of them at a time. and rotate it around and get the other ones. Let's see if we can get this one started. There we go. Alright, we're going to get these snug down and rotate it around, get the rest of the bolts in. Okay, got all my torque converter bolts tightened down with some Loctite, and I went to go ahead and put my starter on. Now I got one of these little Dodge Dakota starters. I think it's a full-size truck, but it came with this kind of a adapter set up for your terminals, and this hits on the engine block. So I took it off and tried it up in there, and that is like really close to the engine block. Now fortunately it has this little cover, but once I get it bolted in place, it's going to be really hard to, actually I don't think you can, because I don't think the terminal would come off. It would hit the engine block before it come off. This probably not a problem, but I'm going to get me some terminal ends made up and put them on there, and then stick this cover on there just in case if it ever comes loose, it's not going to ground out against something. So I'm going to get some terminal ends made up on a cable and bolt those down first, then we can put the starter in. Okay, I got my battery cable made up and got it with a terminal end on it and a little solenoid wire. Got them zip tied together, and so now I'm gonna go ahead and try to get this starter up in there. Okay, I got my starter all mounted up in there, and the wires run out of the way of the header when I put that on. And I've been working on this shifter. I found a bolt that had a shoulder on it, and I welded this tab on it so it can pivot, because I've got a cable, but the shifter that came with, the cable was too short, and so I ended up with an extra cable, but not a lot of the hardware and stuff. It came with a couple extra brackets, so between two of them I made up well, kind of a modified bracket so it'll fit. And I got some of these spacers that came with a bracket kit, extra one, cut them down so that they can space away from the lip on the transmission pan. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this bolted up in here and get the shifter in there and see how it works. All right, seem to have full range all the way back to park, and I measured the amount of clicks. That's all the way down into first. So I think it's gonna work. Okay, I got all my plugs in and had to make a special tool number 39, but they're all in there. And meanwhile, I went to put the distributor in and it hits the valve cover. So I had to beat it mercilessly and also chop off one of the hold downs so that it will be able to rotate and we can set the timing. So got it at top dead center, and I forgot to check compression stroke. Well, I had the plug out, but yeah, it's the nice thing about Mopars. You just take that dude out, put it 180, and you're good to go. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and install these flanges that I got welded up. Try to get some of the exhaust away if I decide I'm gonna fire it up without mufflers. So I'm gonna go ahead and get those bolted on and see if we can find some plug wires that are gonna fit. Okay, I'm gonna put this flange on here because I've run out of pipe, and I just want to get some of the exhaust directed away from well, things underneath here so we don't melt them. So let's see if we can get this lined up. And well, being 100% cooperative, and I have to take these out. And oh, I got the wrong header gaskets. Okay, while I was waiting for the correct flange gasket, I'm getting my transcooler line ready to install, and I think it'll be easier to get up in there before I put this in the way. Got it wrapped up with some heat wrap with a little aluminum tape to hold it in place. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that up in there, then put the flange on. All right, I'm gonna try to sneak this hose past the exhaust and see if we can't keep it out of the way of the exhaust. I'm gonna zip tie it there and run it down the engine block this way, and I'll have to find a few tabs to hold it right there. But meanwhile, I need to get it routed up through here so it can go up to where the cooler is gonna be. All right, I think that's gonna work. Okay, now that we got this routed out of the way, we'll go ahead and get our flange on here. And later on, we can extend it out and make an entire exhaust system. Of course, I have to get more pipe. So, let's see if we can get this up in here. One more bolt, and I think we'll have this wrapped up. Alrighty then. Okay, I found a route for my other cooler line that's going to be a little more out of the way of the exhaust. If I can get this hooked up, then I think we'll be good. Okay, a couple more things I got to do to get this transmission sealed up. This drive shaft was too long and it was bent, and of course this ain't gonna work for going down the highway. It's gonna be so crooked it'll just shake the whole car apart. But this is a 5-mile-an-hour drive shaft for temporary, so we can move it around the shop. Found the right U-joint, and I gotta get my dipstick cleaned up. It's all rusty. Throw a little paint on it. This I'm not going to paint because it's temporary. So I'm going to go ahead and get this U-joint in here and see if we can get the drive shaft up in there. Okay, managed to get the clips in there to center it up. So now we can use these straps and tighten it down, and we'll have a rolling chassis, so to speak, and we can move it around the parking lot out here without having to push it. So I get these started and get them clamped down, and I think we'll be good. Alrighty then. Okay, I took my steering column out and I was getting ready to weld on a double D piece to it, and I discovered that the shaft already had double D on the end of it. Okay, so I took this piece off and discovered that it was already double D on the end. It was a little bit long and it had a hole through it, so I chopped that off and I made the flat spots a little bit longer, and it's gonna fit just like that. So that went a little easier than I thought. So we're gonna go ahead and get this all tightened down on it, see if we can get the steering column back in there. Okay, got the steering column back in, and the steering knuckle seems to clear everything and rotate quite nicely. So I think the last thing I need to hook up underneath is this kick down rod. Got it cleaned up and painted. So we're gonna get this hooked up, and then we can start working on the top side stuff. Okay, I've got the kick down rod clipped on. Looks like it's gonna clear everything. And I got my cable up through this hole up in here. And I had to take this little clip off of it to fit it through the hole. I didn't want to make a gigantic hole. So I'll crimp it back on up inside. And when we get a shifter, we can go ahead and hook all that up. So you lower it down, and from here on out, I think we're good to work on the top side. Okay, I was getting ready to put all my plug wires on and hoses and get everything ready to fire it up. But if I go to put it in gear, I realized I don't have no rear brakes. And I finally got all my parts rounded up. All the little retainers, the pins, adjusters. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my brakes working. That way, if I go to put it in gear, I got a brake pedal. So we're gonna get going on that. Okay, let's see if we can figure this out from scratch. We don't have any example, so we're just gonna get the shoes on there and then try to figure out the springs. Okay, I got the vice grips holding the shoe on because I don't got 3 hands. So let's see how many attempts it's gonna take to get this retainer spring on there. Maybe 52 or 53. We'll see. Oh, come on. Oh. Oh. Something's wrong. That was too easy. Alright. I think I need shorter nails. Okay, sure enough, these are the correct nails. They come with different lengths. And of course, when it's the right ones, it's not easy getting them on. Let's see. Nope. That's try number 1. Okay. Try number 2. Let's see. Sooner or later, you get it. It just takes some patience. And let's see. Is it gonna be try number 2? Yeah, it's fighting me for sure. Oh, come on. No way. Well, no, it's gonna come flying off of there. Whoa. Yeah, there it goes. Okay, finally got it. I think it was attempt number 5, but it's on there. So now we can move on to the other stuff. Okay, I'm thinking that the self-adjuster cable goes this way, and if it's not, well, it's good practice. Okay, after several attempts, I got my upper springs on, and down here, had to put a zip tie on this to hold the mechanism all together while I put the spring on. It seemed to work pretty good. Now I'll just snip this zip tie off of there, and I think we're done with this side. Okay, it's the next day. Got our brakes all together, and meanwhile we have bled the brakes, and we actually have a good pedal. So now that we can stop, we need to see if we can get the motor cranked up. So meanwhile, I've been making these little tabs to hold the wires, and they're gonna go right here, and I can run the wires over the valve covers this way and this way on all 4. And the wire set that I got is enough to do 6 of the spark plugs, but I need longer wires for these over here. I've got another set on order, and hopefully they'll be long enough. So I'm gonna go ahead and make up some more of these little tabs so I can zip tie the wires, keep them off of the headers, and we gotta wait to see if that wire set comes in and see if there's gonna be 2 of them that are long enough. So I'm gonna get going on these little tabs. Okay, meanwhile, while I'm waiting for my little loom tabs to dry, I got to get this HEI connector soldered together with some wire so we can have ignition. And I found this ground cable, which is really heavy duty, and a terminal in for it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this soldered on. I got some giant heat shrink, so we'll have a ground cable. So I'm gonna do a little wiring. Okay, let's see. It's gonna take a little while to get this heated up, but once you do, you just start packing the solder into it and draw it in, especially if you get it hot up in this area. A little heat down here where the wire is, and got pretty much a permanent terminal in. Let's see if we got it hot enough yet. Starting to get there. Might have to get the bigger cord. This is a really heavy cable. I think it's going to take. There we go. Start drawing it up in there. Let it solder down around here. And let that cool. We can slide some heat shrink over it. We'll have a ground cable. All right, nice. That heat shrink also keeps the corrosion down, keeps it sealed off. So we're good to go on that. Okay, this is what I got going on. I found this start-stop switch that I had made up for one of the go-karts, extra one, and push button toggle switch for ignition. And I've got the wires temporary up. I know that's wire nuts, but yeah, we're gonna be disconnecting it and running it into the ignition later on. So I gotta get my main cable from here over around to the battery, and I've got some terminal ends, and one end's already made up. I got to get this 3/8 end on it, and then we'll have power from the battery to our little setup. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and get it hooked up. Okay, I've got my ground cable mounted, starter cable, the main feed cable, all hooked up, and I've got my little tabs all mounted on all four. So I think that's going to be about it for today. And when I come in tomorrow and I get some longer plug wires, we can go ahead and put those in. And we can go ahead and hook up our cooling system, get some coolant in it, and if everything seems okay, maybe we can crank on it a little. Okay, it's a couple of days later, and a much nicer day as well. I've got these hoses that are supposed to be for this vehicle. Now, this isn't the original radiator. It's a little bit shorter. And they do say cut to fit, so I'm gonna have to chop off a little bit of this end And over here on the upper, it looks like this hose is made for a couple of different vehicles because it's like way too long. But I guess if they make a hose that'll fit 2 vehicles and you just cut it off, they don't have to make as many molds. So that's how that works. So I'm gonna get these cut down and see if we can get them clamped in place. Okay, I got this one chopped off just a little bit because you can't put it back on. I'm hoping we got enough. That right there, that should work. And stuff this one on here. I think we ought to be good. Alrighty then. Okay, AutoZone just showed up with my El Cheapo battery. It was like a little bit less than 80 bucks. And the set of plug wires that are super long. I think it's off of a 78 Corvette where the wires have to go way up underneath the exhaust manifolds. So they're going to be long enough for the back two over there, and we'll have plenty of spare wires. So I'm going to go ahead and get this other upper radiator hose on, bypass my heater core for now, and see if we can get a few more things hooked up. Okay, got all my hoses hooked up, little bypass hose, and I hooked up my battery, and these little EconoCraft batteries from AutoZone actually work pretty good. I mean, really good. I put one in my daily driver and that thing just whips that thing over. And I hit the start button on this and it cranks it over pretty good. Alright, did a little cranking on it. We should be getting some oil up. So, I think I'm going to go ahead and hook up some plug wires and kind of go from there. Okay, I got all my plug wires routed and zip tied to the little tabs that I made. And I got the coolant topped off. And, well, actually, I poured a little gas down it just to see if it was going to bust off, and sure enough it did. So I'm going to try to see if we can go ahead and do like a little 5-minute break-in on it. I've got the crankcase over full of oil so it can come up and splash all over the cam, and we'll see if we can get this thing running without wiping out the cam. So I'm going to go ahead and fire it up. Okay, here we go. Okay, that was fun. my starter button jammed on all the time. We should have known that. I'd just disconnect this wire nut, but I think we got it broke in a little bit. She was getting a little hot. Radiator cap ain't working, but I'm gonna let it cool down, and maybe we can fire it up again after it cools down and see if we can bring it down to an idle. Okay, meanwhile, while I'm waiting for the motor to cool down, I've been working on this shifter. I found this old busted up ratcheting shifter that has 3 or 4 layers of ratchets and notches, and it was jammed up. And I tried to weld on this and discovered that it is aluminum that's chromed. I thought it was steel, but you can tell by the weight. So I cut out another piece, and I'll be able to weld a little stud on it that'll sit about right here. And I've already kind of checked it out in the car, and that should draw that cable all the way from park here all the way down to first gear. So I'm going to do a little bit more modifying. Oh, and I found a stud that's the right threads for this shifter knob, and I'll weld it on like so, and we'll have a knob. We don't have to grab a hold of this jagged thing. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get a little bit more done on this while I'm waiting for the motor to cool down. Okay, that is one Frankenstein shifter, but it's gonna work. Okay, we had a little mishap with our starter button. It decided to engage the starter in the middle of our break-in, but I went ahead and removed that, and we're back to touching the wire on the battery to crank it. But she's got a heavy-duty cam in her. Knocked all my sockets off the wall from the thunder with a open exhaust. So we got her a little warmed up, and let's see how she does. Gonna have to adjust the carburetor a little bit, but she's alive. Okay, did a little adjusting on the carburetor and got her to idle. Still needs a little more break-in. When you turn the switch off, it just stops abruptly. So the motor's still a little tight. Need to break in the rings and whatnot. And went ahead and got an ignition switch so I don't have to start it from out here. Of course, that's going to take a little bit of wiring, and wiring harness is in kind of bad shape. So I think I'm going to do that on the next episode. But for now, since we got her running, I think that's going to be about it for this video. And we appreciate y'all watching.